Do. Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. It's time for another edition of the Feedback Loop. Shout out to everybody who put in a lot of effort over the weekend. Saw Luigi and Kara and James and so many of you pushing forward through the winter weekends are often interesting. It's sometimes it's just hard to get going, and so it's nice to see everybody continuing to move forward. Also, shout out to Rebecca for continuing to push through. Your first projects working with clients and developing a rapport and kind of getting a sense of how to handle. Golly gee, I just now realized. Hey, there we go. I had my screen all backward. Anyway, we'll start that over. Greetings, once and all. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. It's time for another edition of the Feedback Loop. Shout out to everybody who was pushing through over the weekend. Luigi, James, Kara, Rebecca, everybody is submitting work. It's nice to see a consistent push as you work through the doldrums of the typically gray winter. It's sometimes hard to just maintain momentum during these moments. Also, big news weekend, whether it's coronavirus or Kobe Bryant, it's just like it's easy to get or the impeachment. There's so many things going on. It's very easy to get distracted. So I do want to give a shout out to everybody who's managing to kind of keep their head down and keep pushing forward amid all the things that are going on. I have to admit I was really distracted yesterday, and it impacted my output. I'm writing the interface design program, and I'm trying to wrap up a very critical component, and worked on it for 2 days and just didn't get it done because I got distracted. And so I personally understand what you're up against sometimes when you're working through particularly these big projects. Rebecca's working with new clients and trying to, it's one thing to learn about design, and it's another thing to apply it with people who don't necessarily, they're hiring you because you're the expert on design. They don't know anything about it, but they also don't necessarily know how to interface with you. They don't know they don't know what the boundaries are. So discovering that and developing a approach to working with clients is just as vital, maybe even more so than the fundamentals of design that you've learned to this point. So I'm sure Rebecca has a lot of thoughts on exactly what it's like to work with and educate, and education is a big piece of it, and educate a new client. But she's moving into new clients now, so I'm very interested to see what the difference between client 1 and client 2 is. And I also want to point out I'm just going to go and share my screen. There have been a couple of questions over the past couple of weeks from students that are considering joining the program, and students that are in the program about okay, what are the next steps? I've done a project. I have an idea of what it's like to work on. I have an idea of what it's like to work on a project, to do research and apply that research to information design, and then to carry it forward and into the interface. And you get it, okay? You get it. Well, in other programs that I've been a part of, there is this whole go build a food truck app thing, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think everybody's portfolio needs projects, but I also would encourage people to look at volunteering to work with an organization. There's a couple of sites that I would highly, there's a couple sites that I recommend that you take a look at when considering volunteering your time to work on a project. And a lot of times you can do these things remotely. So it's not like you have to be in a particular neighborhood or in a particular community. Um, so one of those organizations is taprootplus.org. Taproot basically is a organization that puts people together with so it's you and a nonprofit. So you're basically trying to help people do a better job or have a better representation of themselves in the space that they're in. They don't have funding, but it is you working with an outside resource, an outside vendor, an outside client that really could use your help. So some of the stuff like responsive website updates for WordPress, this leadership Garanga, it's a group in Ohio. There's Rise Zambia, who's looking for some Squarespace help. And this is website design. And the thing I'll point out, and I've had people ask me, well, why would I want to like use Squarespace or WordPress or whatever? Why wouldn't I just build it on my own, or could I build it in Webflow or whatever? Listen, these are all just design tools, okay? I want you to be able to apply the principles that you're learning to whatever tool that they're doing. Some of these are just straight up research situations where they need to go out in the field and research a particular topic or issue or community. And in those cases, like if it's a specific community, you really need to kind of be there. In other cases, it's a global community and you can do that online. So Taproot's the first one. Volunteer Match is another one, and I do believe that you can change this to be, remote. And I'm going to search, and that was weird. Because it kicks over to there's a place called Remote Oregon. Virtual. Sorry, you can switch it to virtual right here, and you can see that some of these they don't necessarily know how to like blockchain backend developer under web design. That's like they clearly didn't know how to categorize it. But here, write custom CSS for Noble and Prize, web designer, WordPress designer, digital marketing analyst, webmaster. Let's just look for UX. I'm just curious what's going to come up here for UX. Browser-based app developer, Nobel and Laureates Library Online, mini opportunities, motion graphic artist. Again, you'll probably have to go through here and take a look. Photoshop, like for some reason UX is applied to Photoshop Guru, but there's lots of opportunities here to work with outside groups. Yeah, senior UX. Oh, Democracy Lab. Okay, well that's kind of interesting. But my point is Human Health Project. Once you get in here and you start looking around, there's quite a bit in here that if you do a little digging, you'll find projects that are worth working on. And I've had people ask, well, how do you work into that, Chris? And how I work into that is I give you a backstop on which direction a project should go, if the research that you've done is quality or not, if the designs that you've done are quality or not, how to handle a difficult client, which often comes up. Ask Rebecca. Although in fairness, her clients were not difficult. That like we don't like this type of difficult. They were just most clients, particularly in volunteer situations, they are stretched. They may have never worked with the designer before, and it is important that you're educating them on what to expect and how this works. And that's sometimes very hard when it's your first project. So I assist with that. But by and large, I would much rather see you do a project with a nonprofit than go build a food truck hub. That's just my personal opinion. Some of these projects do have a specific time period. Some of them are 2 weeks, some of them are 6 weeks. So you want to take that into account when you begin ramping up. Some of these are like full time. They will. You can't really have have this off to the side. Some of them you can, but you've got to dig through the resources here and look around. So Rebecca had a question about how to should she look at other outside projects, and if you do, this is where I would look to cultivate another project. But volunteer match, Taproot, those are 1 and 2 for me. There was a third one, but I honestly I use these two for sourcing projects that I feel are nonprofit in nature, and you can't go through and just kind of turn over stones. You want to look for people to help, and that's great, but you don't want to spend all your time just looking for somebody's project to work on. And these two sites give you an opportunity to begin digging in and really building out your portfolio. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So once you learn the basics of UX and interface design and front end development, I push you here. I push you into, let's go into volunteer world, and really I become the project manager for you. And okay, we're going to work on this now, and here's how we're going to tackle it. And you're going to go forth and do that. So if you have any interest, I'll drop these links into general, and we'll move forward, because we have Luigi's case study. Congratulations, Luigi. You have you have officially reached the final checkpoint, the final chapter of the UX program as it's currently structured. The UX program is going through a bit of a overhaul. Everything that's there now will still be there, but it's getting a battery of exercises at the front of it. It's going to match more of what I'm doing in interface design, where there's an exercise and there's a ton of resources attached to the exercise. This allows me to take the bulk of the writing that I'm doing and associate it with multiple exercises, rather than have one exercise at the bottom of every chapter that I'm writing. By the way, I'm up to like 43 chapters now in the program, and the exercises no longer match up. So there's some chapters that have that never had an exercise attached to it, and that's really why I'm making the shift, is because some chapters just need to be a chapter, and the way that it was previously structured, if a chapter didn't have an exercise, the chapter didn't get in, and that's a problem. So with that said, Luigi's gone through the first phase of the UX program, and he's got a robust overview that he's put together. And I said overview because I just read it on the screen, but he's got a robust case study that he's put together. And a couple of things that I want to mention here, because it often comes up when you are building something new. You don't have a problem to solve, okay? You have an objective, you have a place that you're trying to go, but there is no problem to solve yet. When you have an existing project, you typically have a problem to solve. You may have an objective that you're trying to reach, but there's typically something that is known that you're trying to work around. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see problem solution. You see objective challenge here. And that's something Luigi and I talked about last week, and I feel like it's very appropriate for a project that is new, which is what the Fresh Market app or the fresh market delivery service really is. It's a new addition to an existing business. One of the things that you'll note, and Luigi, I will go through this in more in depth. We're just kind of looking at it as an overview, is that this is quite long. Okay, even where he's only written like a sentence on each of the things that he's done, it still like bleeds on, and then he's got his initial prototype, and then like what he found out from the testing, and that's super important. What I would say is this middle section that feels thin, it needs to grow, and a lot of people would look at this and go, well, Chris, wait, this is going to get so long. No one's going to read all that. Right, you are. Nobody is going to read all that. But this isn't for outside consumption specifically. What I look for, and this is a little different, by the way. It used to be that I would tell somebody, write me a case study. And then what we're going to do, write it long, and then we're going to edit it down, okay? And then we'll put that online, and there will be your case study. That's not the way I really approach this anymore. And there's a specific reason why I like to go long and robust. And it's because this case study, what Luigi's putting together right now, is the basis of a executive summary. It's the basis of an overview, which you'll put online. It's the basis of a presentation that you might show in an interview. But you're only going to show chunks of this at any given time. You need it all because it's the source material. And I want you to think about this like it's a film. Okay? Think about it like it's the director's cut of the film, which is always significantly longer than what you see on TV or in the theater. Okay? You have what went to the masses, and then you have like the robust cut, and sometimes you'll have the other versions of it where the director's talking over the top of it and talking about like, oh yeah, I wanted to do this, and maybe she wanted to do that this other thing. Directors can be boys and girls, by the way. But the real point of the case study, I think, is to act as the base that you build off of for all these other experiences. But there's no reason to edit this down for consumption. You might make a copy of it and edit the copy down, but you want that one long base that you can go back to for your talking points. You can go back to for a presentation. You can go back to for an executive summary. You can go back to for the overview that you put in a portfolio. But you want this to be long and robust. You want this to have everything in it. And I think you're on your way. I do think that it says below are the links to my research and a brief description. I think I would like a little more in these areas so that when we get into talking about it, I have a little more of an idea of what's happening, because I don't necessarily want to click through, but I want to have enough information to make a decision should I need to click through. And right now, I'm not quite sure that I have it. But again, I'm at a 20,000 foot view here, Luigi. You submitted this morning, which I appreciate. But I want to dive in. I want to dive in deeper, particularly on this middle section. I really do feel like I recognize. You mentioned what you tested. You mentioned how people responded, and then you also focused on like how you grew through the project. And I think that how you grew is always, how you grew matters. And this is important. I realize I'm bouncing around here, but how you grew matters none. That doesn't matter at all to an executive summary. It matters greatly in an interview, and that's what I mean by one file, different use cases. Okay, there's going to be entire sections of this case study that will not see the light of day when taken and used in a different format. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be in the case study. So this is like the primary case study that all others will be based off of. Okay, and I think once you have this, you'll be ready to move on. And over time, this will grow, because once you get into the interface design program, there's going to be additional artifacts. And by the way, this is all the stuff that he created just going through the UX program. That's a lot of artifacts. Very robust. So great job there. Another thing I wanted to point out, James had submitted his work, and James is a little earlier in the program than Luigi, obviously. But James is working through scenarios and user stories, and James had his scenarios as part of the personas, which they should have been, but we have to lift those out. We have to lift those out and get those into a spot where you're not having to dive into Figma files to find the scenarios. So as you're working through, Katie, I'm looking at you. You're going to be coming up on this area soon, and I want to encourage you to, whatever scenarios you're creating, have those in a place where it's easy to reference. Because when I pulled open his user stories, which are, by the way, very robust, I had Margaret and Amir, and Margaret and Amir have particular user stories that are very specific to them, but they do not, I was unable to locate, like, okay, well, where are these scenarios that are attached to Margaret and Amir? And they were, of course, in the Figma file, and the Figma file is not searchable. Here, if I just go, if I say find, I say Amir, I can find Amir, and that's great, because I can just type the name in, and there they are. And that's another reason why I don't like having. That's another reason why I like having a journal where everything is, rather than having you submit these into individual submissions on the site. I like having the journal. It's searchable. We can go back and forth, and we can look up and down. And when you're working through a project, you're constantly going to be referring back to things that you've worked on before, and what you're working on in the present has to align with the findings of the past. And that's one thing that I did appreciate about these user stories is, like, we'll go to Margaret for a second. Margaret's user story was focused specifically on the mom that needs to look out for what the child is eating. And that is a very common scenario, particularly when it comes to any sort of food or dining service. Like, there's always the parent looking out for the child. There's also the parent looking out for the rest of the family. I can't tell you how many women basically carry the load because their husband doesn't know what to shove in his mouth or not. And that comes up in findings over and over and over again. So it's not just taking care of the kids, it's also taking care of the dumb dad, because dumb dad just forages and eats anything. But that's something that's just come up in all of our research that, and I've done enough research on with students going through food apps and things, not just specific to Fresh Market, but other things. That just comes up over and over. So when you put the Margaret case study or scenario in here, it's like, oh yeah, I totally recognize that. The one thing that I would mention is you have these scenarios in here surrounded by green, and that's fine, but it adds a lot of noise to Margaret and Amir, because what you'll notice is some of these things, like I want to view nutrition information to make sure I'm eating healthy, that follows through. So I'm trying to, I wonder, where was the nutrition information? Could have swore that was on all of them. So, well, maybe it wasn't. I'm looking at a mirror. Well, let's just, I want to see the menu to see what orders are available. I want to see the menu to see what offerings are available. So, like these things that are on each of them, I really think that just kind of lives up here in the first one. And in your scenario, in your user stories that are related to scenarios, just put the ones that are related to that particular scenario, because that allows us to really hone in on what's unique about this one. And because otherwise I'm kind of swimming around and I'm the boxes are great, but I'm kind of distracted by them. And it just looks like there's a lot of stuff here, when actually there's not as much stuff. There's a lot of stuff here, and there should be less here and here. Oops, that's Adam. Now I'm opening a text editor that I haven't seen in a long time. Don't reopen. Yeah, I have not seen that text editor in forever. And I love you, Adam. You were fine, but we use VS Code now. And I believe that is basically it for today. So to round up, James, let's go a little bit, or not James, Luigi, let's go a little bit more in the paint here. I'm going to give you some specific feedback to your case study. James, let's make sure that, and everybody, when you're working on your scenarios, have those in your journal so they're easy to refer back to. And when you're listing those things in your user stories, like lift out the specific user stories that are for a particular scenario, like the one here with Amir and Margaret, and put those so that they're easier to scan. And then finally, if you're looking to dive into other projects, rather than just kind of creating something on the fly, and I will stop myself and say this, time out. If you are going the entrepreneurial route and you have an idea that you would like to work on, and you're saying, I want to apply the UX process, or I want to apply interface design, I want to apply something that we've covered here at New Pragmatic, I want to apply that to my idea, and I want to build that with your guidance, I am down for that. I'm here for that, okay? What I'm also saying, though, is that you don't have to come up with something just off the top of your head to make a project. There are so many people out there in the world that need your assistance, okay? They are looking for a designer to come through and help them elevate their organization, reach people that need their help. I see a lot of medicinal foods here. But my whole point here is that in allowing somebody to benefit at a nonprofit from your skills, you're opening yourself up to get some real collaborative experience that will look good on your resume. Okay, it'll look good in your portfolio, versus kind of sitting down by yourself, coming up with an idea, drawing a cute logo, and saying, this is what I did, and here's what I learned. Those are great too, but they pale in comparison with the concept of working with somebody you don't necessarily know and building something for them. It's far too easy for us to flip around what the goals are when we're working by ourselves. The moment something becomes hard, we kind of shift, we kind of move the goalpost. When we're working with somebody else and they're saying, "Hey, I need to fix blank, and I need you to figure out what the pain points are in our process, because people come to us and they don't sign up for our service, and we want to give people food, for instance. Why aren't they taking the food from us? And you got to find that pain point. You can't move the goalpost around. You've got to solve the problem, because that's the problem that's been stated by somebody other than yourself. Okay? So I would encourage you to take a look at Volunteer Match. I would encourage you to take a look at taprootplus.org. If you need any assistance, I would encourage you to reach out. If you land one of these and you would like to have me ride along with you and work through the project, that's a perfect way that we can collaborate together. So hit me up on that. But otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, it is that is the feedback loop for today. And I hope you all have a magnificent week ahead, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Take care.